I'm about to tell you 3 things about this that I'm holding in my hand, and all 3 of them are true. 1, this is not a picture. 2, this was not printed. And 3, this was printed. Wait, huh? The first thing is this is not a picture in a traditional sense. This is not a 2-dimensional sheet of paper or any sort of medium that we've used thus far. It was not printed by an inkjet printer or laser printer. It's actually 3D. And of course that answers the last question. Well, then it was printed. Yes, it was printed with a 3D printer. And I don't even like the word printed because it just draws too many incorrect assumptions about what this is. The best way to describe this is by dropping the title of the movie. This is a HueForge. HueForge is a clever bit of software invented by a guy named Steve that takes the 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional aspects of a 3D printer. You're able to give different hues and exposures to this overall image, and when it's all said and done, you have something that looks like this. I want to share the joy of doing HueForge with everyone, especially my Patreons. So I'm going to start a series today with 2 parts. The basic level parts, which is going to be public for everyone, and then the advanced and more personal instructions that will be on my Patreon only. I've really got addicted to HueForging, but I couldn't be happier because this has given me a whole new way to reimagine the art that I'm trying to accomplish. The first thing you want to do is follow the links down below to the HueForge website, where yes, indeed, you do have to purchase HueForge. It is a paid-only software, not just to use it, but also for commercial uses. But that's kind of exciting because a lot of people are finding out that selling your HueForges, especially if you're taking photos like wedding photos or baby photos, you can take their pictures and then turn them into HueForges and make a pretty good profit doing that. So head on over to HueForge and get your license depending on your needs. Once you finish downloading HueForge, you're going to open it up and you're going to see this. Whoa! One of the main reasons why I'm making this tutorial is because this was incredibly daunting when I first opened it up. Where do I even begin? Thankfully, there is a HueForge Discord that's very active and everyone in there is super helpful. Without them, I don't think I'd be where I am right now. After you drop in a picture to HueForge, you might be a bit disappointed to see that it doesn't instantly convert the picture into the way you want to print it. That's just not possible, maybe when AI gets really powerful, but you'll see from all the consideration and effort you have to put into to get it where you want it. No AI program I know of can actually accomplish that. The first thing you want to look at is your step height. That is just corresponding to your slicer's layer height. Make sure that they're the same so that your HueForge and your slicer are on the same page. Then you look at the base layer height, and that's just so that you have good bed adhesion for your first layer. Line that up with first layer height over in your slicer. Then comes your detail size. Now, if you're printing with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, I would recommend not going lower than 0.2. And the reason is that you generally don't want to do less than half of your nozzle. If you're printing with a 0.2 millimeter nozzle, you can go to 0.1 just fine. Although I will tell you right now, a 0.2 millimeter nozzle makes things a lot more complicated, and I do not recommend it for people that are just starting out, because not only your prints can take longer, you're going to have less prints to practice on, it's also more complicated as well. It's for advanced users only. The next thing you want to change is your width and height. This is going to be how much detail you can get in there. Really super tiny pictures are going to be tough to express that detail just as much as a 1080p video doesn't have as much detail as a 4K video. So set that as large as you can print. You can't do it larger than that without cutting it up and making some sort of panel thing, which is still cool. The next setting that's the most important is something that is fundamental to how HueForge interprets the picture. The colors, the luminosity, everything. Down here in the luminance, this is the main thing you're going to be changing depending on the different pictures you want to accomplish. For our purposes, we're only going to be dealing with standard or combo, because they're just interpreting the picture based off of luminance values. It's not actually taking color into account. Whenever you add color into the mix, things get a little complicated. So for this tutorial on YouTube, I will only be teaching you that aspect of HueForge, because not only is it going to help you get started quicker, it's also just a lot of my time that I'm going to have to go through explaining the very complicated and intricate parts of color pop and color aware. But don't worry, just because you're only having luminance red and not color doesn't mean that you can't actually add color into the image. Now, before we start dragging colors down here to our sliders, I do want to show you something that is called the min depth and max depth. For now, honestly, just keep it where it's at. That's standard. I use that 99% of the time anyway, so you don't really have to touch it. sRGB and unbiased lighting, dynamic depth, I wouldn't touch those either. After dozens of HueForges, I've never changed these, so I don't think you have to either. The brightness compensation, you absolutely will have to change, especially when you're getting into other modes, but for now, we'll keep it as standard, and you see that kind of changes how HueForge is interpreting the luminance on this picture. The smoothing will smooth out spikes in the way that the three-dimensional picture is kind of operated. I don't recommend using smoothing, or at least like less than 2, until you really know what you're doing, because smoothing can really mess things up. So keep that low. Then, of course, the brightness adjusts as if you want to have the picture be brighter or darker. Now, that is a bit confusing because remember, just because you set this brighter over here doesn't mean that you can't make it darker by using the sliders and setting how many layers you actually want your blacks and your whites and your other colors to be. This kind of comes down to where the main dynamic range of your picture is, and you want to set your brightness adjust to where you're getting the most amount of dynamic range. If you're just starting out, I do not recommend you changing that. Set that back to 0 and just leave that where it is. It's pretty standard, and I barely touch that either. Okay, so a few more settings before we really start sinking our teeth in. Down here, spike removal, I would also just leave that as at fast. That's gonna cut out some of the crazy spikes that can happen with really high contrast areas, and it can be a bit unsightly or even difficult to print. Fast is really where you wanna be. If you go to something like aggressive or moderate, you're gonna be losing detail. Okay, and as you just saw, I made the image darker by dragging this black slider around. You have to understand what these sliders are. These sliders are a representation of two very, very, very important things. One, at the top here, transmission distance. The transmission distance, or TD for short, is how much thickness you need of this filament to not show the colors under it. So a higher TD will show the colors under it for a lot more layers than a low TD. Blacks are very low TD because even with just one layer of black, you pretty much can't see anything under it. But for something like white or yellow or even the beautiful Polymaker Natural, it takes like 10 layers sometimes to completely hide the layers under it, especially if it's a color like black. And that right there is the core principle of HueForge. If there was no transmission distance, everything you printed would look cell shaded, just layer on layer of color. You wouldn't be getting these incredibly smooth transitions of colors and even different hues and pigments because you're blending the colors. The second thing this slider is showing is what layer height it's at. Right now, black is up at layer 11, which means that at that layer, it's gonna then change to white until the end of the image. So the first thing we wanna do is adjust our blacks down to the very bottom of their minimum, which is 0.52. Then the fun part comes, just start throwing some colors in. I think I wanna start getting some of these reds to pop. I'm gonna try my Bamboo Basic Red, which honestly is really awesome. I'm super pleased with it. And that's one thing about HueForge. It's really great to have the same color, but a different TD. So here we have a light red with a TD of 3, and the Bamboo Basic has a TD of 4. May not seem like a lot, but it can make a big difference whenever you're layering these reds on top of each other, and what you're gonna get is a sort of blended, more natural feeling rather than something that's just really sharply red. And one combo that I use pretty much every day now is Aqua Blue from Polymaker and Azure Blue. Put Azure Blue under the Aqua Blue, then put that Aqua Blue on top, and you just get this wonderful lighter blue. Now, if I didn't have the Aqua Blue, which has a TD of 5, this is what would happen. It would just kind of look washed out. I would not really get much contrast. But because the low TD value is above the black, that Azure Blue with the high TD is kind of drawing that black up through the image by passing light through it, and so you're getting a darker image. So the best way to understand TD is with the Polylight Natural from Polymaker, which if you're a HueForger is just a must-have. It's got a TD of 21, which means it's basically clear. Watch what happens when I drag this above the blacks. The blacks are at layer 11. Watch what happens when I drag this natural above the black layers. There we go, layer 11. And now when I start dragging that above, it's making the image darker. It's drawing those blacks up to the top of the image, which of course, whenever you add white and black together, you get gray. Oh, what's that? If you try to use your middle mouse button to move the image around like I do, because I'm a Blender user, then you'll notice this thing goes really crazy. This is showing you your slicer view. This is actually what your slicer will show you because your slicer doesn't understand transmission distance. And if you're just looking at raw colors, this is what you would see. But because we know natural is an incredibly high TD, you'll actually see this. Super awesome. I'm gonna drag my black layers up a bit to get more contrast, our natural up. I pretty much always put a natural under the white, and that helps blend up to white so that you're not getting these like blown out highlights, but you do want a little bit of highlights here. Yellow is a fantastic color because it blends well with pretty much everything. And especially if you're going for like a little bit of a golden sunlight, you can put that under the natural and then you'll blend that yellow up into the white. And there you go. We have pretty much a golden hour or maybe even like a morning kind of looking vibe here. Even though I don't think the blue is perfect, and I wish I had a higher TD blue so I can blend through those shadows more and not get such a stark contrast between the grays and the blues, I really love this kind of morning light look. It really reminds me when I was in America and we were going camping and you wake up and the sun is just rising and there's the blues from the nighttime, but then there's those golden rays from the sun. A very nostalgic time, and this picture now is going to mean something to me. Okay, now that you're done, and by the way, you're not done because you're gonna come back and fret over it for hours, trust me. You're gonna go up to the top and click File, Save Project As. I'm gonna walk you through the important settings when it comes to Bamboo Slicer, so if you're using a Bamboo printer, you'll be able to follow along. However, as a way to really give back to my Patrons who's been supporting me, I'll be giving you all my slicer profile and tune filament lists, which by the way, does take a bit of time if you really wanna dial it in for the maximum amount of fidelity. But for everyone else, I'm gonna walk you through the most basic settings you need to change. First is layer height and first layer height, as we talked already. The next, you're gonna go into strength and set your sparse infill density, or just your infill, to 100% rectilinear. The next thing is turn off support. You're not going to need support. You want to make sure you're using Arachne wall generator to get those really fine details. Classic's going to miss out on a lot of that. And lastly, your speeds. You want to slow HueForge down. There's a lot of tiny little movements that are in HueForge. This is filling out all the intricate details. And if you're going too fast, especially if you have a bamboo, it's gonna cause stringing and other problems. I slow my first layer down to 45. If you wanna take a screenshot, you can take a look at my layer times right here. This has gotten me pretty far and I don't have much issue as long as my filament is dry. Go to the folder where you saved your HueForge, and you'll see 4 files here. The HueForge profile, so if you drag this into HueForge, you can reload your project. The next is a saved PNG of the image. The next is the describe text when you're filling out the layers in your slicer. And last but not least is your STL, which you'll drag into your slicer. It'll take a minute. And now you can see, here's your HueForge. Not very impressive yet, but don't worry, we're getting there. You can just click Slice Plate. It will take a hot minute depending on how big and how high detail it is that you're printing. When I printed on a 0.2mm nozzle, I was using a 0.1mm detail size on a 200 by 200 picture. It took like 15 minutes to slice, by the way, so just take note of that. That's what I said, when you go to 0.2mm nozzle, it's big boy territory, and to be honest, I had to tap out. I'll get back to it another day. Switch the color scheme to filament, and do turn off those pesky seams. And now you see a bunch of black nothing. What the heck? Where's my HueForge? Don't worry. Now we're going to open up the describe text, swap instructions. This is really awesome how Steve did this, so shout out to him. Start with black, obviously. At layer 14, switch to natural. Okay, so layer 14, you go down your slicer. Layer 14, change filament, go to natural. At layer 18, we switch to red. Oh wow, it's pretty fast. At layer 20, we swap to light red. At layer 23, switch to yellow. At layer 27, switch to natural. At layer 29, we're gonna switch to cream. Okay, and then at 39, switch to white for the rest. And there we go. After you're done with that, you're gonna go to the top, you slice the image again, and voila, there you go. That's your sliced view. Now what you want to do is go back to HueForge and click your middle mouse button to see what this looks like, especially like the shadow areas. You see how this tree looks like. Let's see, is that how we look? That looks pretty similar. Yeah, we're looking good. Look at this rock right here, how much black is there. That's going to help you make sure that you're getting your layer swaps right. It can happen, you might get one layer swap wrong, but especially when you're talking about skin, because what could be beautiful peach vibrant skin color can become a zombie if you miss your red layer swap. The last thing you want to do is load up your AMS with the right filaments, but don't worry, if you don't have an AMS, it's not the end of the world. You still can do HueForge quite easily. In fact, most people don't have an AMS and they make lots of amazing HueForges. The way you have to do it though is by going across here. Instead of having a filament change, you're going to right click and click Add Pause. You add a pause at all of the layer swaps and then you just manually swap those. I do recommend you use a little notepad and write it down or even print it out and have like a checkbox kind of thing, because if you're doing a really complicated picture, you might lose track of which is which. Okay, match up your AMS with the right filaments and send this bad boy. And here we go. Here is our picture. I like it, but I noticed the yellows are not quite as bold as they were when I was looking in HueForge. And that's one last thing I'll mention before we close it out, that your TDs matter quite a lot. And the reason why the yellows are not stronger on the actual print is because I used the wrong yellow. I accidentally used Polymax yellow, which has a really high TD of 12, versus using the bamboo yellow, which I set this as in HueForge, which has a TD of 6. So this yellow here is showing a lot more of the red coming through rather than giving that nice yellow pop. It's not that the bamboo yellow is better, it just means that in different situations you'll want higher TDs or lower TDs. That's the fun part about it. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed. This is going to be an ongoing tutorial series to help you guys really get a grasp of HueForge. I'll be going into more depth and more detail on my Patreon, so if you want to get access to that, follow the link down below, because to be honest, I don't know what I'm going to finally land on with my channel name, so the links may change name, but they'll be correct in the description. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time. Oh, hello there. It's at this point that many of you might be asking yourselves, did I just join a cult? It's a perfectly valid question. Just make sure to like and subscribe. I repeat, like and subscribe. Also click up here or over there. Just click somewhere on the screen. It doesn't actually matter where you click. That's the secret. Once you finish, got him, bastard. That's sent. The transmission dis.